It started because I stayed late after parent-teacher night. The building was empty, the kind of silence that makes you hear the heating pipes breathing. Our school, St. Hilda's Primary, isn't old by most standards, but one of its wings dates back to the 1920s. The caretaker likes to tell stories about the original classrooms, the ones they never quite modernized. I'd been teaching history there for 5 years. Most of my lessons were about wars, suffrage, the Depression, things I could frame neatly in timelines. But that evening, marking essays beneath the humming fluorescent lights, I ran out of red ink and went hunting for a spare pen. The supply cupboard in the old wing hadn't been sorted in decades. Inside, under yellowed stacks of exercise books, I found a cardboard folder bound with string. Its label had nearly worn off, but one word was still visible: 1927. Curiosity always wins with history teachers. I carried the folder back to my desk and untied it. Inside were class photos, sepia, mounted on thick card. Each one showed rows of children in wool sweaters and pinafores, sitting behind tiny wooden desks. Most of the images were faded, but one was strikingly clear. It was captioned St. Hilda's Infants, Form 2B, 1927. 30 children, maybe 6 or 7 years old. Their expressions ranged from bored to proud to frightened, normal for old photographs. But the longer I looked, the more uneasy I felt. Something about the composition was wrong. At the second row's edge, a small boy sat slightly apart from the rest, his chair turned inward as if he'd been added later. His clothes were older-fashioned even for 1927. Button-up boots, a stiff collar. The light fell differently on him, colder, flatter, like he'd been lit by a different window. And unlike every other child, he wasn't looking at the camera. He was staring directly at whoever had been sitting in his place. I told myself it was just an optical illusion. Maybe the print had been retouched. Photographers did that often. Still, something compelled me to flip the photo over. On the back, in spidery ink, someone had written, "Freddie Ward, absent, May 2nd. Beneath it, the same hand had added another line, this one more hurried, yet present. I felt a faint chill crawl up my arms. Teachers' handwriting rarely lies. You can sense the difference between neat record-keeping and the tremor of someone unsettled. The next morning, I mentioned it to our head teacher, Mrs. Hale, a practical woman who laughed easily and feared nothing short of Ofsted. She smiled at my story. "Probably a mistake in the archive," she said. "We had a Freddie Ward here in the 20s. Died of scarlet fever, poor thing. The nurse's log still mentions him." "So, he died before that picture was taken?" "About a week before, if I remember right. The school closed for fumigation. They must have mixed up the roll when they reopened." She looked thoughtful. "You should show it to Mr. Tanner, our caretaker. His grandfather went here. He collects that sort of morbid trivia." I nodded, but the idea of showing the photo to anyone made my stomach tighten. That evening, curiosity won again. I scanned the image on the staff room computer, adjusting brightness and contrast. The children's faces sharpened, freckles, ribbons, the solemn weight of early-century childhood. Freddie's face emerged clearer too. Round cheeks, parted hair, eyes so dark they reflected nothing. When I zoomed in further, I noticed something odd about the light around him. The shadows from the window stretched rightward across every desk, except his. His shadow fell left. A minor retouching flaw, maybe, except retouching in 1927 required direct contact with the negative. Someone would have had to paint that light by hand. I printed the scan anyway, thinking I might include it in a local history lesson. Kids loved spooky stories, and the tale of Freddie Ward, the phantom pupil, had a certain charm. 2 days later, my Year 6 class had computer lab research time. I used the hour to prep a slideshow about St. Hilda's early years. I dropped the scanned image into the presentation, full screen. When it appeared on the projector, several pupils laughed nervously. "He's creepy," one said, pointing. "The one on the side." "Who?" I asked, pretending not to know. "The boy by the window. He looks angry." I looked at the projection. Freddy's expression seemed unchanged, still blank, still staring forward. "His eyes move when you blink," another whispered. The laughter died. That night I dreamed of the old classroom. I could see the blackboards with nursery rhymes chalked in careful handwriting, the rows of desks, the smell of ink and chalk dust. I heard children reciting in unison, the sing-song rhythm of "Ba Ba Black Sheep." Then one voice broke away, thin, tired, almost pleading. "Please tell them I'm here." I woke with the taste of chalk in my throat. The next morning, I went back to the old wing. I told myself it was research. The caretaker's keys were still hanging on their hook. I borrowed them and unlocked the unused classroom that mirrored the one in the photograph. Dust coated everything. The blackboards were still intact, faint words visible beneath decades of grime. They said, "Come here and have some tea." The desks, though, weren't the same. These had been replaced long ago. But the floorboards creaked in the same pattern, and sunlight slanted through the same tall windows. I held up the photograph, aligning the angle. It matched perfectly. Then I noticed something new. Near the far wall, where the curtain met the chalkboard, a faint outline marked the wood, about the size of a small child leaning back against it. I traced the outline with my fingers. The wood felt colder there, smoother, as if worn down by hands or by time. The caretaker's voice startled me. "You're not supposed to be in here after hours." I turned. Mr. Tanner stood in the doorway, holding his mop. "Those floors will give way one of these days." I hesitated, then held out the photo. "You ever see this before?" He squinted, adjusting his glasses. "Ah, Form 2B. My granddad was in that lot, second row, fourth from the left. That one." He pointed at a smiling boy with a bowl cut. "Do you know about Freddy Ward?" His face changed. The casual humor drained away. "Where'd you hear that name?" "It's written on the back." He took the print carefully, turned it over, read the note, and exhaled slowly. "I shouldn't have said anything," he muttered. "My granddad told stories. Said they took the class photo twice that year because something went wrong with the first plate. When the second one came out, Freddy was in it, only he'd already been buried. He handed it back, eyes serious. Best not show that one to the kids again." That night, I couldn't resist looking up old records. The local archive had digitized the parish burial lists. Frederick James Ward, age 7, interred April 26, 1927. The school reopened May 2nd, the same day written on the back of the photograph. So yes, he had died a week before. I stared at the scanned image until the pixels blurred. Then, somewhere behind me, my printer whirred to life on its own. A fresh copy of the photo slid out, darker than before. In this one, the seat beside Freddy, the one that should have been empty, was occupied. By me. I took a week off work. Officially, it was stress leave. Unofficially, I didn't know what else to call it. I couldn't tell anyone that I'd heard a dead child's voice in a sealed darkroom, or that a photograph was changing every time I looked at it. But even away from school, it followed me. The smell of old developer clung to my skin. When I turned off the lights at night, faint shadows flickered against the walls, rows, shapes like desks. By Friday, I couldn't stand not knowing. If there was a logical explanation, I needed to find it. The caretaker, Mr. Tanner, met me at the gate early the next morning. He didn't ask why I'd come back. He just handed me a ring of old keys. "I knew you'd come eventually," he said. You won't rest otherwise. He led me down to the basement. It was colder than before, the kind of cold that seemed to come from inside the brick. He stopped at a narrow door I'd never noticed. The sign above it had rusted away, but the outline of old lettering remained. Storage room 2B. Was this? I began. He nodded. The old classroom. They sealed it off in the 50s. Never reopened. He pressed one of the keys into my hand. You'll want to see for yourself. The lock turned stiffly. The door creaked open onto darkness and the smell of dust and varnish. I flicked on my flashlight. The beam caught rows of desks, smaller than modern ones, arranged neatly despite decades of neglect. Chalk still covered the blackboard, faint poems scrawled across it in childish loops. On the teacher's desk, a slate lay cracked in half. The chalk read, "Ba, ba, black sheep." For a moment, it felt as though the class had only just left. Then I noticed one detail that froze me. Every desk had a name tag carved into the wood, 30 in total. But near the back, one desk had been removed, a darker square of floor marked where it had once stood. Above it, carved faintly into the paneling, was a name. F.J. Ward. My flashlight flickered. For a second, it wasn't dust I saw in the air, but movement. A shimmer, like heat haze. A child's outline, sitting where the missing desk had been. "Freddie?" I whispered, before I could stop myself. The air thickened. The beam bent, distorting around a shape. I heard a faint scraping, the sound of chalk against slate. When I looked at the blackboard, fresh words were forming under the old rhyme. They said, "Come here and have some tea," but they didn't see me leave. The chalk rolled off the tray and hit the floor with a soft tap. I backed toward the door. My pulse hammered in my throat. Just as my hand found the latch, I heard another sound, a quiet flutter behind me. The class photograph had slipped from my coat pocket and landed face up on the floor. Freddie's image was gone. In his place was an empty desk. I didn't stay to see more. I shut the door, locked it, and forced myself up the stairs 2 at a time. Tanner met me at the top, alarmed by the look on my face. What happened? "He's still there," I said. My voice shook. "He never left that classroom." He hesitated, then sighed. "My granddad used to say the same thing. They thought he was making it up." I looked at him. "Why keep the room sealed?" "Because they tried to move the desks once. After that, more than one child started talking about a boy sitting in the back. Always the same seat, always the same name. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about that missing desk, the dark square on the floor, the faint writing on the wall. Around midnight, I decided to do one last thing. Compare the 1927 photograph with a current class photo taken in the same room before it was converted to storage. I pulled both onto my computer screen. Overlaying them, the alignment matched perfectly. Windows, chalkboard, doorframe. Only one detail stood out. In both photos, a faint child-sized blur occupied the same corner. In 1927, it was Freddie Ward. In the modern one, it was empty space, but the light there bent just slightly, as though the lens had focused on something unseen. I zoomed in until the pixels broke apart. For a heartbeat, I saw eyes looking back. The following morning, I returned to the school one last time. I told myself I needed closure, though I wasn't sure what that meant anymore. The head teacher had left for a conference. The corridors were silent except for the distant echo of cleaners. I went straight to the old wing. When I reached the basement door, I found it unlocked. Tanner must have left it that way. Inside, the room was just as I'd left it, desks still aligned, the air thick with dust motes drifting through the slats of light. Only one thing had changed. The missing desk was back. It sat perfectly aligned with the others, its wood unaged, surface clean. On top lay a folded piece of paper, the same kind used in the 1920s. I unfolded it carefully. The handwriting was a child's. "Please tell them I'm here. I didn't want to miss the picture." Beneath the note, the class photograph rested, but it wasn't the one I knew. This one was modern. My own pupils filled the rows, wearing their school uniforms. Their expressions were solemn, eyes unfocused. And behind them, at the edge of the window, stood a small boy in a wool jumper, smiling faintly. I must have blacked out. When I came to, the classroom lights were on, and the caretaker stood over me, his face pale. "What happened?" he asked. I sat up slowly. The photo was gone. The paper too. Only the smell of developer lingered. Tanner shook his head. "You shouldn't have gone in there." I didn't answer. There was nothing to say. A week later, the local council began renovations to finally modernize the old wing. They stripped out the floors, removed the desks, repainted the walls. I thought that might end it, but the builders complained. Tools went missing. Chalk appeared overnight, spelling strange phrases on the new boards. When I visited to collect my remaining things, one of them handed me something they'd found sealed behind the paneling. A photograph. The same 1927 class, the same children. But now, there were 32 of them. The extra figure sat in the front row, adult-sized, wearing a modern cardigan. My cardigan. I left St. Hilda's after that, moved across the country. I told myself it was a new start, but the truth is, I still can't stand the smell of chalk or the hum of old fluorescent lights. The photograph sits in a sealed envelope at the back of my filing cabinet. I haven't opened it since, but sometimes, when the classroom down the road empties for the day, I catch the faintest echo of voices drifting through my window, children reciting rhymes that no one's taught in decades. And beneath them, always the same small voice, soft but certain. "Please tell them I'm here."